people in this country are definitely concerned that they've lost control of their data.
Using that artificial intelligence to determine where a missile should hit.
Doomsday clock, it's the closest it's ever been at 90 seconds to midnight.
Hi, I would like to take you through a journey of seeing the tech sector through my lens. I worked in technology field for 25 plus years, and I spent the past 16 years interviewing tech entrepreneurs, luminaries, visionaries, and others in Silicon Valley, alongside having multiple events that covered various social and economical issues in the tech sector. I was born in Tehran, Iran in 1975. 5 years after my birth, Iran had its revolution. In 1979 and 1980, in September, Iraq attacked Iran, and I witnessed a war firsthand. My mom was a nurse. She worked in the hospitals dealing with victims of war. So on Fridays, I would spend my day seeing refugees and people that had taken shelter in hospitals. And my dad was an engineer. We were a middle-class family. I've seen long lines for people waiting for food, and it was unsafe. And my family felt that the best thing they can do is to protect their kid and bring me to America. In 1986, I was able to get a visa with my mom to come to the US and really to migrate and escape the war with Iraq. Iran has always been vilified. For as long as I remember being 5 years old in Iran, after the hostage crisis, Iran has always been on the axis of evil, according to George Bush. And so in the US, when I grew up as a kid in middle school and in high school, we were picked on, and frankly, there was a lot of discrimination.
I went through a little identity process when I was in high school, because I was a sophomore in high school when 9/11 happened. And I didn't really understand what was going on. The distinction between Saudi Arabia, other Arab countries, Iran, why people were calling me a terrorist. I didn't understand. So when I got to college, I focused all of my studies on understanding my identity. Who am I? Am I Iranian? Am I American? What does that mean? At the end of the day, I said, no, I'm Iranian American. America is a melting pot. America stands for values. It's not about your nationality. It's not about where your parents came from. It's the value system that this country stands for, and that we all, as citizens, will embody, hopefully. It's not always like that, though, right? And you look at our history, it's not always like that. But we got to keep fighting the good fight, because the arc of history bends towards justice, hopefully, right?
I worked in the retail selling computers and Apple Performas, and I worked my way up working in the technology industry. And I was really good at it. By the age of 21, 22, I was making $250,000 a year working in the tech sector. It was financially rewarding to work for big tech companies as well as small ones. I think the most rewarding career moves that I made involved working at startups, the camaraderie, working late night and building a product and taking it to market. That was really rewarding.
Vahid, you are the best salesman that we ever had at Exodus, and I'm always excited to meet you, and I'm always excited to work with you.
Same here, Jagadeesh.
I get a deal on my table from Vahid. Everything was cool, except at the bottom of the paper, it said, I guarantee a keg of beer. So at that time, you sold the deal, and you expected us to go and buy a keg for that company, for their company, every month that they were on Exodus.
Wow.
That was classic.
Technology is an inevitable part of most business processes and one of the main tools for helping businesses grow. BizCloud is here to provide your company with cutting-edge technology solutions to help your businesses achieve higher efficiency and better cost control.
I started a company called BizCloud. We hired a team, and I wanted to get involved with the Occupy movement. I launched a site called Age of Nepotism, wrote a book about it. I'm writing this book, and I'm learning about the CIA extraordinary rendition program by a company called Computer Science Corporation. CSC is one of the oldest software companies, and it started in the 1960s. They provided planes that were used in renditioning innocent civilians. And I'll give you an example. They took a guy by the name of Khalid El-Masri. He was a German citizen. He was in Macedonia on vacation. And he was taken for 3 weeks and interrogated by the Macedonian police. In 2003, he was then handed over to the CIA to be interrogated. They spent 2.5 months interrogating them. After he goes on a hunger strike for 27 days, they check his passport and realized he was telling the truth, that he's actually a German citizen and not a terrorist. They still kept him for another 3 months. They tortured him. They flew him across various sites, including the salt pit in Afghanistan, sodomized them. And then once they realized they have the wrong guy, they release him in the middle of Albania without any means to get back to Germany. And he gets picked up by the Albanian police, accused again of being a potential terrorist, and he finally makes it back home. I found out about CSC in 2008. In 2010, CSC decided to use my company's name for its product offerings. What ended up happening is they sued me in 2013 for using my own trademark, for using it for my own company. They took me to court, and I didn't have the financial means of getting bigwig lawyers. My lawyers made me mediate and settle. And after that, I decided that I really don't want to have anything to do with this stupid brand, that I really don't care about my damn company, that I really don't want to be associated with any of it, and I don't want to be associated with anything that I have done. So I'm going to jump off a perfectly good balcony and kill myself. Hence, the injuries and the cane. All the Humpty Dumpty and all the king's men and all the king's horses couldn't put Humpty Dumpty back together again. And Stanford did a great job, don't get me wrong. I was lucky. I went to the best hospital. I spent 4.5 months in rehabilitation, in getting physical therapy. I filed for personal bankruptcy from my hospital bed. And when I came out, Business Cloud was shut down. I didn't pursue it anymore. And I was a broken man. So I said, fuck it. I'm gonna go get a job at the biggest, baddest cloud computing company there is. And I ended up working for Amazon Web Services as a senior alliances manager in big data and analytics. I didn't touch anything government related. I was on the commercial sector of the things.
Companies like Amazon are really slave drivers. They don't value their employees. It's a hard work environment. And I did not enjoy the time that I spent working on Amazon Web Services for Andy Jassy. There are a number of factors that play in Silicon Valley. One is the need for wealth. The other one is the need for power. And last is the need for vanity.
We find entrepreneurs, people that work at giant tech brands, academics, and other kinds of geeks, broadly defined, to do a fashion show.
That they feel like they're in a forever race to have the best car, to have the best house, to have the second home or the third home, and to compete with their neighbors.
That's the kind of people I hired, right? They're into the money, they're into mortgaging their houses, they're into lots of kids, lots of houses, lots of cars, and they all care about winning. It's all about winning.
Talent is rewarded in Silicon Valley, but as long as it benefits corporations. There's not a lot of room for public discourse. You have to be submissive to your boss and to your employer, because if you operate outside the construct that the employer makes for you, your job could be endangered and you could find yourself unemployed. You know, when it comes to diversity and inclusion and technology, less than 23% of tech employees are women. And then also there's a huge income inequality between women and men.
Fairness and equal opportunity for people of all backgrounds is important, just on a moral level. And this includes race, class, gender, sexual orientation, national origin, income level, disability, neurodiversity, and age, and just where people live, even if they are not near a big tech company. Companies are saying they're hiring a greater percentage of people from diverse racial groups, which is true given the reports the firms put out. But these increases aren't leading to increases in the overall percentages of diverse employees, which points to retention and work environment issues. Retention is as big an issue as recruitment for diverse talent. Finding a mentor or a sponsor within a company can be difficult. Without one, it can be nearly impossible to ascend to a leadership role. And very few people of color or other diverse people are in leadership at big tech firms. And when they are, they're, say, officers of diversity, rather than tech people hired on merit and treated the same as everyone else.
Ethics in technology began as a result of Occupy movement. And ethics in technology wanted to highlight the ethical use of tech and how it can benefit humanity.
I want you to take your phones out of your pockets and hold them up high, if you would. Hold them up high. Please now take a minute, unlock your phones, and whoever's sitting to your left, take the phone and pass it over to them, please. Let them browse through its content. Let them go through page by page, reading your emails, looking at your contacts, see who you have in your Rolodex, who you texted last night when you were drunk. How does that make you feel? Reality, that's what the NSA is doing right now, folks. You know, there was a reason we put up those NSA tickets online. They didn't buy one. I'm sure they're here. They're defrauding our end keeper, of course, but that's a different story.
These surveillance programs aren't targeting activists. They're not targeting. What they're doing is they're bulk collecting. The Verizon order said that they are collecting all of the phone records every day of all calls going into or from the United States. They're not targeting people. They're bulk collecting.
The reason that we care about the NSA having access to this information is that it gives them the power to decide, you know, which of us have been naughty and which of us have been nice, regardless of whether we actually have been or not. And that kind of power, that power to ability to bring the government to bear against ordinary people, basically because you might have pissed them off, or you might be on the wrong side of a political campaign, you might want some kind of change that people in power don't want, is an awesome power. And it's why we have the Fourth Amendment that says that the government doesn't have access to your papers unless they've got a probable cause warrant. And I don't think we throw that away for a backup. Most of the political actions that have happened in this country have happened because people could have a private conversation before they had a public one. And that you can't have that if the government's always watching.
When you see surveillance rolled out, it's always rolled out in the name of combating something horrific. 20 years after 9/11, we know all too well that the surveillance tools that were sold to the public as a way of combating terrorism are now routinely used to target shoplifters, to target people accused of misdemeanors, to target unhoused people simply because of their lack of stable housing. And so when you hear that a new surveillance tool is being introduced, you can't just look at the thing that the company is saying it will be targeted at. You have to think of all the other things it will be targeted at down the road. And so you have to ask yourself this very basic question. How else can this tool be used? We've seen private companies using these sorts of tools to target journalists, to target activists, to target progressive groups, to target organizers, to use these new technologies to suppress and punish dissent.
The majority of the tools that we use to communicate, to organize, to witness, to document, and to protect are owned by corporations. That's the reality. And these corporations are sometimes, and we are seeing this more and more in the areas of privacy and surveillance, deeply enmeshed with state power. And so how do we carve out enough space in these corporate areas that we can continue to do human rights work And then the much, broader question of, how are these necessary tools basically sabotaging us before we even start?
We really need to be cognizant of what we're allowing people to do, whether it's corporations, whether it's governments, whether it's our own selves putting our own information out there and trusting things irresponsibly, that we're doing things that are very dangerous and are putting ourselves at risk.
The NSA is everywhere, and I don't know about you, but I find the fact that they're spying on everybody kind of comforting, because what could be more democratic than that?
I think there's an art that only a few political commentary have that can bring comedy into the masses to discuss serious issues of the day and make them pay attention. Who wants to watch the daily news unless it's done through Jon Stewart or through Steve Colbert, and they put comedy behind it? So not only do you understand what's going on day to day, but also you get the satire and you get a little comedy relief by watching it.
I think my thoughts about a baby at this point in my life are like my thoughts about an Apple Watch. Like I don't need one. I don't want one. But at this point in my life, if someone were to give me one, I'd probably re-gift it to my mom. Oh!
So I find out dating apps really get me confused. Because some guys say, I'm monogamous, but I'm looking for something casual. Or some guys say, I'm polygamous, I'm looking for something serious. So I would say my ideal relationship is half monogamy and half polygamy. I call myself monopoly. You have to be monogamous, but I can do whatever I want.
So that's why ethics and technology events always had comedians from the get-go. Our goal was to make sure that the public is made aware of the challenges that the technology sector is facing and how their data and privacy are being violated.
Unfortunately, the evolution of regulation and oversight is always going to lag the actual creation of data and the data science. And if you look at the history of informatics and you look at the way laws have evolved, the laws have always kind of reacted to what's available. So you're always going to have data that no one ever conceived about, technologies that no one ever thought would be possible, and then the regulation kind of comes after that. What you're going to see happening is the legislation will lag the data, and there'll be these pockets of opportunity that pop up.
People in this country are definitely concerned that they've lost control of their data. There's no question. I hear it all the way along the line across the entire spectrum. We have a responsibility as well, because we want to make sure that all people in this country have some amount of protection, and we want to make sure that there's some guidelines to keep these companies from going off the rails like we've seen in the Cambridge Analytica type scandals and the altered Pelosi video. We need to make sure that there's rules that these companies understand and that can follow. We don't want third-party organizations or entities out there with data and in a way that they feel like they can share that data for profit.
Mark Zuckerberg said that Facebook was the new church. He said it will connect the world's people to something greater than themselves. They will address the problems that are civilizational in scale and scope, building the long-term infrastructure to bring humanity together and keep people safe with artificial intelligence. Zuckerberg goes on to describe what the purpose of Facebook, and it sounds a lot like the Church of the Middle Ages with its totalitarian domination. And we call that the Dark Ages for a reason. Zuckerberg says this: Facebook would know every book, every film, every song that a person has ever consumed. Facebook is not alone. You give us more information about you, about your friends, and we can improve the quality of our searches. We don't need you to actually type at all. We know where you are. We know where you've been. We can more or less know what you're thinking about. That's Google's Eric Schmidt. Sounds a little bit like God. The combination of knowledge and freedom works to accelerate the asymmetry of power between surveillance capitalists and the societies in which they operate. This cycle will only be broken when we as citizens and as societies, and indeed civilization, realize that surveillance capitalists know too much and have too much freedom and too much control.
In the days before the election, when I wrote a satire called Hit the Road Trump, to the tune of course, Hit the Road Jack. So it's a satire about the end of Trump's stay in the White House and how he might react to being the outgoing 45. However, when I started trying to promote the video on social media, I found that Facebook would not allow me to do so. It took me a while to figure out what was going on and that they weren't just picking on little old artist me. What I quickly learned was that there was a complete ban on advertising of any content on Facebook that Facebook deemed to be related to social issues, elections, or politics. What shocked me about the ban was how broad and far-reaching it was and how it was impacting nonprofits who, sometimes have an interest in social issues. Unfortunately, the impact of the ban on nonprofits has been woefully unreported on. We must be engaged and vigilant with respect to the role and power of big tech and their ability to surveil and met out social control, whether intentionally or not. I don't mean that in a conspiratorial way. I just mean that in terms of an objective analysis of how much power certain media companies have to moderate speech, the scale of the impacts of what they do with this power, the lack of transparency of their actions, and limited ability to appeal their decisions. Consequently, it is so important to all of us that we grapple with these issues and develop appropriate and effective public policy, regulatory, and personal responses.
So the problem is not really content moderation, it's more the current monopoly we're experiencing where 4 or 5 sites govern all communication globally. And this has been commented on repeatedly that it's because social media functions as a walled garden with very high switching costs. Leaving a website because you don't like its moderation can result in the loss of communication with one's friends and community. To that end, I tend to, like many in this space, be a major advocate of federated social media as a potential solution to some of these problems. It's basically proposing to make social media work much the way that email currently does. Leaving your email provider doesn't prevent you from emailing anyone you choose, even if they use a different email provider. And what this means is that social media can function in a more granular community-based moderation approach that still allows individuals to converse with whom they want.
Surveillance is a big area for big tech. They make money off of surveillance. They're in the business of surveillance. Companies like Pegasus and NSO Group that produce Pegasus can scan your phone without you knowing. They are responsible for the death of Khashoggi, the Saudi Arabian journalist that was chopped up into pits in the Saudi Arabian embassy in Turkey. Israeli tech companies that are in the business of surveillance, and they are working to provide constant level of data to government agencies. And of course, US has this thing that says, oh, we're against these companies, but they're the ones that also use these technologies to surveil on the masses.
For people who are not under constant surveillance in a very heightened state of risk, going through, for instance, through border control and getting their fingerprints scanned or their face recognized through facial recognition through a camera is not such a violent experience. And therefore, we have normalized all of these technologies that exist everywhere. And the only way that we can pressure back, like push back on these technologies being implemented everywhere, really, is to stop the normalization of the implementation of these technologies.
With the proliferation of modern digital and surveillance technologies, the line between what is public and private has become massively blurred over the last 20 to 30 years, and the traditional quasi-public status of driving around in a car, essentially combined with this technology, is being used to subvert the Fourth Amendment and its expectation of privacy. And of course, as is always the case with such surveillance technologies, it is big business. Location data is big business. ALPR vendors aggressively court local police departments. ALPR stands for Automated License Plate Reader. Police departments use them to scan and look up the criminal status of a particular car's license plate. Now, this is always something police have done. You know, cars are driving around in public. Police have always been able to take down license plates and look them up. But like so many things that can get computerized and automated, it becomes a question of scale. ALPRs take the human out of the loop and let license plates be scanned on a simply staggering scale. And millions are spent by cities every year licensing this technology.
Profitable private prison corporations, including the infamous GEO Group, rake in hundreds of millions of dollars more from e-monitoring. Professor Chaz Arnett of the University of Maryland Law School says that, quote, once you get into these practices where you're pulling data, biometric data, and these companies are using that data to further monetize their programs and experiment, often it's people of color who are having their data extracted from them. This valuable commodity is literally the body of Black individuals. App-based monitoring is one form of surveillance formerly incarcerated people must endure once they've re-entered society. Too often, these people come from over-policed communities in the first place, where they are subject from everything from cutting-edge technology like Stingray phone trackers, to facial recognition-equipped cameras, to spying on their social media accounts, and, as we saw last week in the headlines, the New York Police Department's new Digidog robotic canine unit that was deployed to a home invasion in the Bronx last week.
In 2003, when I was transferred to 611 Folsom Street, was working at the AT&T Internet Room, and I discovered they had installed a splitter cabinet which contains splitters. Splitters are just glass prisms that split the laser light beam that carries the information on the internet. And each half of the split contains all the information. And one split went on its way as it was supposed to, and the other half went to the NSA secret room.
So what is the role of defense contractors in the surveillance state? Can you talk about
striking.
that?
In my day, RAND was one of the very few nonprofit private corporations that worked for the national security establishment. Others, like WESIG or IDA, were much closer associated and less independent than we were. Now, of course, Booz Allen is one of hundreds, if not thousands, of corporations that control some of the most sensitive intelligence data. 70% of the intelligence budget goes to private contractors. I don't think that was true for a single dollar 40 years ago, and it wasn't true of the RAND Corporation. But of course it's absurd for private contractors to have this kind of capability. It really smells of fascism.
There's a lot that I find troubling in the tech sector. I write about it in Ethics in Tech and Lack Thereof, the book that I published a few years back, including things such as labor practices, its environmental practices by using resources for AI and for cloud computing. I would write about things such as the promotion of war and conflicts by the tech giants.
This is a website that I really care about. It's Big Tech Sells War, how big tech companies are profiting from wars. So the global war on terror and the rise of big tech. The big tech contracts in the US are extensive. They've been spending over $44 billion since 2004 with companies like Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Facebook, and Twitter. It's not just that they're selling data and your personal information to the NSAs of the world and to the defense contractors, but actually working on drone projects and weapons of inhumanity to be developed by organizations such as these.
So the multinational companies that are benefiting from these wars are making something like $52 billion in cash reserves next year. There is a revolving door between big tech and government. Big tech sells war.
You know, the defense industry has our government in a vice grip.
And some of the numbers, I think, coming out of the last election cycle are very startling. $13 million were donated to members of Congress alone in the last election cycle by defense giants. Those numbers are exponentially bigger once you start going down the line. And I think that starts to explain why this problem is where it is today and why people are finally starting to realize that there's really controversial and policies that aren't good for the people happening because the defense industry, I think, just has too much of a vice grip on our government.
According to the Entertainment Software Association, the ESA, in 2020, there were an estimated 214.4 million video game players in the United States. Shooter games were the third most popular genre. Within the gaming market, military or war-themed FPS is first-person shooters, is a major genre, accounting for 26.9% of all games sold in the US in 2018. It is estimated that 80% of male gamers aged between 18 to 34 and 61% of men aged 35 to 54 play FPS games on a regular basis. The military recognized this and launched their own esports teams and tournaments, Twitch channels, and other social media accounts specifically for advertising and streaming on Twitch netted the Army 13,000 new recruiting leads in the first 6 months of 2020 alone. Kids watch these esports military personnel and see themselves in them, see themselves playing alongside them, never realizing the chances of them playing esports for the military as a full-time job is far, far less than the chance of them suffering trauma, injury, military sexual assault, or other serious and life-altering consequences. There's further tie-in for targeting gamers, and that ties into the future of warfare with the push towards over-the-horizon capabilities. That gamers have an existing skill set that provides an advantage in the future of drone warfare. This is especially attractive. It can be defined as any military capability which can strike terrorists and target without American boots on the ground, or very few if needed. Drones and airstrikes are the current iteration. As a gamer, I don't want to see our hobby used to promote anything other than fun and community. As a veteran, I don't want to see another generation of veterans. I don't want to see more children pulled into a system that leads to 22 individuals taking their life each day. I don't want to see more families living in fear of sunny, clear-skied days.
So U.S. military officials publicly refer to the civilians they accidentally kill as collateral damage. And of course, every time you've seen it, they say, oh, we didn't mean to do it, we regret it, we take all the measures, we go through great lengths to avoid killing innocent people. There is, however, another name for collateral damage in Pentagon speak, and it's bug splat. That's what some drone operators call their victims, and that's actually the name of an early 2000s military computer program that generated blob-shaped images resembling insects splattered on a windshield to represent the civilians that would likely be killed in a proposed strike. However, in the 21st century, US military planners have been using algorithmic calculations to predict how many civilians will die in a given action before such attacks are approved. Mark Garlasco, who was in charge of high-value targeting at the Pentagon during the early days of the 2003 invasion, said the magic number is 30, meaning if you hit 30 as the anticipated number of civilians killed, the airstrike had to go to Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld or President George W. Bush for approval. That's really reassuring. If less than 30 civilians are predicted to die, neither the President or the Secretary of Defense needed to know. So Garlasco said that in 2003, when the list was being whittled down, there were about 300 targets where more than 30 civilians were expected to die, and that every single one of them was approved except for 2 buildings that were full of foreign journalists. That magic number of 30 was believed to have later been reduced to 25 and further restricted under Barack Obama, who, by the way, devised a really dubious method of trying to keep civilian casualties down. What Obama did is he redefined the term combatant to mean every single military-age male 18 to 55 in a strike zone. They're all terrorists, whether they were or not. Daniel Hale, a former Air Force signals analyst tasked with identifying high-value drone targets, said that the most disturbing thing is the uncertainty if anyone I was involved in killing or capturing was a civilian or not. There's really no way of knowing. We see this every time Israel bombs Gaza, one of the most densely populated places in the world. We also saw it during the Iraq War when, according to Iraq body count, 77% of the people killed were civilians. Whenever you hear military officials or media pundits claiming that this is the most humane form of warfare ever, you should immediately see a blood red flag. For while high-tech weaponry theoretically can reduce bug splat, war is a reality, not theory. And the reality of modern war is the same as it always been, and that's innocent people always pay a very heavy price.
The way AI is being developed is they want to to have no regulations, they want no government oversight, and they want to have free reign as to how they develop it. It is the AI that was used by Israel to control the media and the narrative that the Israeli military has developed with the help of Silicon Valley. They provide tools like Red Wolf and Blue Wolf to keep track of medics, to keep track of journalists. More journalists have died in Gaza than any other war combined. Medical workers that are dead as a result of the technology that's directly produced in Silicon Valley.
You may have heard about the news of the Gospel artificial intelligence system, which the Israeli forces are using to select hundreds of targets for use of force, whereas in the past, without artificial intelligence, it was only possible to select a handful in a day. This artificial intelligence system essentially collects data of people in Gaza, facial recognition data, location data, matching it with their bio data and other information that they have been collecting on people in Gaza for many, many years, and then collecting all of that and essentially using that artificial intelligence to determine where a missile should hit. It converts all of that data on people into a score, so a number out of 10, and then whether that number is sufficiently high will determine whether or not a missile strikes.
All this AI has become weapons of math destruction. That's according to Cathy O'Neill, a data scientist. She calls it weapons of math destruction. But I disagree. I think that it's the wrong subject matter. It's not, math is not the problem. It's social studies. It's the wrong class. It's our social sciences that are warping our algorithms. It's our social operating systems. If we create automated intelligence, it's going to reflect our social operating system. And that's what needs to change. Do you think that AI is going to fight for decolonizing our settler regime? Or is our AI going to fight for expanding colonialization and more control of our personal lives?
The tech industry is responsible for the mass death and starvation of civilians in Gaza. Unfortunately, Gaza is only a testing ground for these weapons. So these weapons are used in Gaza, but soon they will be going to every conflict all around the world, because the countries that use them, like Israel, have no ethics or morals, and they have no scruples about sharing that technology with the worst of humanity, with other dictatorships to oppress their people. So using AI, using surveillance, using technology that does targeting of civilians, journalists, all of that will increase in wars to come unless humanity takes an direct action and decides to put these kinds of technologies out of existence once and for all.
When Reverend Blake talks about a culture of violence, I think that resonates profoundly in terms of the globe, in terms of inside the United States. If only we could have an outcry similar and of the same magnitude about the very justified demands for gun control in the United States. What about gun control at the Pentagon? It's just not even on the media agenda. I can't find a single member of Congress or a major media commentator in big media outlets saying, what about gun control at the Pentagon? Gun sales, weapons sales, weaponry, sales to dictatorships, not only, to many other countries as well. You get to Israel, the occupation and suppression of Palestinian people. We have, nationalism, we have racism, we have religious bigotry, all sort of layered across to make that okay. And this is out of a political establishment or media establishment, largely institutional religious establishment in this country, Jewish establishment, the what Zionist Christian establishment now. We're saying, oh yeah, go Israel, go, go. And meanwhile, you have into the millions of Palestinian people living under subjugation and oppression and occupation that's gone on for now, more than half a century, one decade after another. And this really goes back, I think, to the failure and the opportunity for a single standard of human rights.
Silicon Valley is very well aware of how the technology that they're developing is used to kill people. They might pretend to be ignorant just so that they can sleep at night, but ultimately they know the misdeeds that the tech company plays. And if they don't, I feel sorry for them to have that go on under their nose and not be aware of it.
How can we ignore war? We can do it because we've been trained to do so. America has been, for the last 30 years, just become masters of ignoring the wars that the U.S. is perpetuating all over the world. So we can go back to March of 2022, recent history. Visitors to the New York Times homepage saw a headline across the top of their screens in huge capital letters that said, "Rocket barrage kills civilians." It was the kind of breaking news banner headline that could have referred to countless U.S. missile attacks and other military assaults during the previous 2 decades, telling of civilian deaths in Afghanistan or the U.S. attack Pakistan and Iraq and Syria or elsewhere. But those war on terror killings did not qualify for the New York Times big banner headline that said rocket barrage kills civilians, even though the U.S. had killed many civilians in those places. But the U.S. media coverage was vastly more immediate, graphic, extensive, and outraged about Russian slaughter than American slaughter. This silence, this deadening silence about war has created in our souls, created this hardness of heart, this spiritual disease that we can tolerate so much. You know, America's philosophy is it's not really war if no Americans were killed.
I'm here right now in Vietnam, and they're very familiar with American invasion and American wars. Look at the American wars in the past 30 years in the Middle East, in Libya, Somalia, Yemen, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Afghanistan, now Iran, Gaza. It just doesn't end. We're in a cycle of perpetual war and conducting perpetual wars. And we're always looking for our next enemy. I guess Donald Trump has decided that now Greenland is a good place to invade, or Panama, and let's make Canada our 51st state. So, as you can see, the U.S. aggression has no bounds, has no limits, and has no borders. And nobody is safe from it, really. Ukraine, too. Look at U.S. doing a deal for its natural resources, to pick up the natural resources of Ukraine for providing it with weapons. So, ultimately, Ukrainians are on the hook for many, many, many years to come. And they have to continue to supply their natural resources to America in order to fight this war against Russia. We're facing another set of conflicts in the Middle East. I think there's a lot of Iranians are unhappy with the current regime that they have. At the same time, they are very proud people. Them being conquered and told who the ruler should be is something that they don't want, and they're going to go and pick their own faith as to who they want to have them lead their nation. Unfortunately, the US and Iran spend most of their efforts in building weapons and bombs than in diplomatic relationships and in talking to each other. So the challenge is lack of diplomacy and too much weapons at the hands of fools. And those weapons, let it be missile systems, intercontinentals, AIs, robotics, drones, are all backed by tech companies. Tech companies design them, tech companies build them, tech companies enable the use of these weapons to the detriment of humanity.
We can't begin any conversation about nuclear weapons in the Middle East without first addressing the elephant in the room, and that's the nuclear arsenal of the apartheid state of Israel. Nobody but Israel knows exactly how many warheads Israel has, but most experts concur that the number is in the low hundreds, and they can be delivered in a variety of ways. Then there's Iran, which doesn't have nuclear weapons, but according to United Nations experts, has enriched enough uranium to build several bombs. And this is really a shame because it didn't have to be this way. The Trump administration's unilateral abrogation of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which we know better as the Iran nuclear deal, I think was one of the biggest US foreign policy mistakes in recent years. And the world's 9 nuclear powers spent over $80 billion on their nuclear arsenals last year, and more than half of that amount was spent by the United States. Broken down by the minute, that's $157,000 per minute on nuclear weapons. $16 billion of that is in new nuclear weapons contracts awarded to private contractors, largely the result of massive lobbying. So what we need today, I think, are courageous leaders that are willing to sit down and talk like Reagan and Gorbachev. And don't get me wrong, Ronald Reagan's overall record as president was horrific. His administration is behind some of the worst human rights crimes of the 20th century, both at home and abroad. But even a rabid anti-communist Cold Warrior like Reagan was able to sit down and talk to his former enemy in order to achieve a world in which the threat of nuclear war was just a little bit or even significantly reduced. Now, subsequent US administrations would, of course, violate the spirit of rapprochement between Reagan and Gorbachev, primarily by extending NATO to Russia's borders. The point is, countries have taken historic steps toward disarmament, and we can do so again, given the right will and leadership. The will and leadership is sadly missing at the governmental level, at least in countries where it matters most. I mean, what's the good of a treaty outlawing nuclear weapons if none of the countries that actually have them are willing to sign or ratify it?
US military policy having to do with nuclear weapons is no better or worse than Russia's. And what we need is the willingness to engage in diplomacy. Diplomacy is a dirty word. And as long as diplomacy is a dirty word, then nuclear Armageddon gets closer and closer. And that doomsday clock that we talk about, and we should talk about it from the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, it's the closest it's ever been at 90 seconds to midnight. And if we refuse to support individually and collectively diplomacy, it's going to get closer and closer to midnight. So we need, I think, to challenge ourselves and each other to say, what is it in US media? What is it in US politics? What is it in our own culture that says, now diplomacy is a dirty word? And so we have an opportunity to say that maybe we can stop being so proud and arrogant about being Americans and realize that the United States has killed so many people based on so many lies. It doesn't justify what Russia does, and what Russia does doesn't justify what we're doing.
Unfortunately, currently, tech companies face no consequence. Neither does defense contractors for killing innocent civilians. But these tech companies belong in The Hague, just like the individuals that are causing these grave misdeeds like Gallant and Bibi or Netanyahu and others, including the current administration and the previous administration that have enabled these wars. They own the media. The Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post. Mark Benioff owns Time magazine, as well as other media outlets are owned by multinational corporations. And so they control the narrative around these conflicts. But the narrative is getting out of their hands, because what you can see now is on Instagram, is on social media, the impact of these wars. You can see starving kids. You can see the genocide that's taking place in Gaza. And so therefore, people are not blind to it anymore.
I recently read an article about pinkwashing. Pinkwashing then is a way of claiming to have higher respect for progressive moral values by supporting some of those values, specifically maybe women's rights or LGBT rights, and claiming that that makes you and your religion and your nation higher and better than the other people. When used in reference to militarization, the term pinkwashing refers to the practice of presenting a military occupation, as in Gaza and the West Bank, as if it is progressive, feminist, and LGBT friendly. I've even had so many of my Zionist former friends respond on social media to me and say, it's the most democratic country in the Middle East. And then it's highlighting progressive sexual freedoms by an occupying force to distort the profoundly unprogressive nature of the military occupation itself. And we can see through that crap. We are united in saying that genocide is genocide and that it must stop.
This genocide has sparked the largest mass movement of Jews in the modern history of this country and for Palestine. While Vahid and others have concluded that there are no ethics in big tech, technology also allows us to bear witness. It allows us to see the genocide, in some cases live, and to join together and rise up against it with one global voice. As Adnan Ahmed wrote, quote, dismissing the fact that a genocide is occurring and then suppressing speech sympathetic to Palestinians has a gaslighting effect on the public that is already engaged. A false charge of anti-Semitism is intended to distract, deter, and punish people for speaking out against the genocide. But as these tactics and others to stifle and suppress support for Palestine that are proving to be ineffective on the masses who are hyper-connected globally with the help of social media. You know you're not alone.
I mean, there's a lot of grassroots movements against wars that are taking place. Unfortunately, nobody seems to be hearing the calls of the masses that are asking for the war in Gaza to stop.
I want to specifically name out nonprofit organizations that promote human rights values and have been absent in making a public statement condemning the violence that's besieged in Gaza, that they have failed to address the ceasefire needs for humanitarian purposes to people that are cut off from water, food, electricity, internet, basic services. But now there are organizations such as Stop Killer Robots Campaign, Article 36, Minds Action Canada, All Tech is Human, and many others that simply stay silent and complicit towards the aggressors and towards the oppression of Palestinians. It seems human rights and values does not apply to Palestinian lives. That's why they don't make a public statement. Actually, some of them have fired their employees that have spoken against the genocide that's taking place. How's that for free speech?
I was a lawyer in the field of refugee trafficking and modern slavery. I worked for around 9 years in London, and I'd had some experience working at the United Nations and was very interested in the campaign, its vision and values, and working in disarmament on this crucial issue. I believed I was respected and appreciated by the leadership in the campaign, and I really enjoyed working at the campaign. I was terminated because of a tweet relating to the international law violations taking place in Israel and Palestine. The organizations that run the campaign have to be responsive to the people who fund them and concern themselves about protecting the relationship with those states. And Austria was a state that we were working very, very closely with at the time. And it is also a state that is very pro-Israel to the extent that it is providing full diplomatic backing and voting against a ceasefire. I think that's a factor, and is one that we have called for accountability over in relation to this decision, and also wider campaign structures. And I think that is needed, especially at this time when we are witnessing a genocide, and the campaign, which is involved in humanitarian disarmament, ought to be calling out for a ceasefire at the least, but also specifying the international law violations that are taking place.
As Gaza burns, injustice against one is injustice against all, especially when that injustice is directed at fellow humanitarian workers that are now dismissed and left unemployed and terminated from their work due to pressure that's put on by various organizations and groups that they worked for.
The problem that I see is that people view that we have capitalism. In reality, what we have is not capitalism. Capitalism would imply that we have free markets. In reality, what we have, and every single one of these recessions have proven us, is that we have subsidies for the corporations. We give billions and billions and billions of dollars for chip plants, for AI, for subsidizing technology development, for subsidizing defense industry. We subsidize pretty much a lot of industries, including oil and gas. But for the masses, there is no subsidy. They get to play the Hunger Games. They get to starve to death, while big tech companies end up benefiting from these government subsidies and handouts. So Elon Musk can go to a city in Texas and avoid paying local taxes by having his manufacturing run there. Frankly, companies are only responsible to their shareholders. And the way capitalism works, they have no responsibility towards the average citizen, towards their employees, towards the benefiting the humanity as a whole. So the only thing they care about is the value they bring to their shareholders at any cost and at any price.
I say that it's not okay to have our best instincts for connection, empathy, and information exploited by a draconian quid pro quo that holds these goods hostage to the pervasive strip search of our lives. It's not okay for every move, every emotion, every utterance, every desire to be cataloged, manipulated, and then be used to herd us through the future tense for the sake of someone else's profit. It's just not okay. Surveillance capitalism has usurped so many of our rights in these domains. It's a scandalous abuse of our digital capabilities. And their once grand promise to democratize the world through the internet has been thwarted. There does need to be a digital future, but let it be a human future first.
The ethical resistance that needs to be built has to be grassroots. You know, the technology workers have a big obligation in terms of how they respond to their bosses, in terms of the projects they get engaged on. Unfortunately, tech employees are treated as disposable. So within these companies, when they raise their voice, they're shunned, they're blacklisted, and they don't get hired and they lose their jobs. But they need to continue to stand up for what they believe. They need to continue to check and make sure that their employers are doing work that's ethical, that's meaningful. Otherwise, it's just a damn paycheck and you're selling your soul to the highest bidder. Choose the companies you want to work for. Decide who you want to get your paycheck from, what kind of business you want to be going into every day. Does it make you proud? Does the company that you work for represent your values, the values that you were raised with? Does it represent the values of human rights? Does it represent the values of digital rights? And if it doesn't, go pick a different firm. You have a choice of businesses to work for, and nobody is powerless. So choose wisely. Don't end up like me, working at Amazon Web Services for Jeff Bezos and Andy Jassy.
What advice do you have for the poor soul who's working at the NSA or working at one of these defense contractors, seeing injustice and humanity being carried out every day? what incentive do they have after the trial of Bradley Manning and Snowden fleeing to Russia to step in and do what you did? What would you tell that person?
I would tell them, don't do what I did, which was to go to Congress first or go to my superiors in the Defense Department. Don't do that. What people advise them to do is the right way to do it, because that does nothing but identify them as troublemakers and potential leakers, and to get them cut off, retaliated against, stigmatized by their people, as happened to the NSA people who did exactly that. As they said, they did it wrong, Snowden did it right.
What gives me hope today is always the kindness of humanity. Even at times of difficulty, at times of wars and conflict, you see that millions of people come to the streets and they beat their chest for people they don't know half a world away, that they see suffering online, that they come out and they cry openly, and they're willing to get arrested, they're willing to be jailed, they're willing to deal with the powers that be, because they want to represent what's good in humanity, and they want to stand against war and injustice in places like Gaza and elsewhere. So that kind of kindness, that kind of camaraderie is what gives me hope every day.
Samuel Huntington talks about the clash of civilizations between the East and the West. Others talk about Christianity versus Islam, or NATO versus Russia. But at its core, I believe that the real struggle that humanity is facing is between these two competing ideologies of I am one versus we are one. And so how do we come to embrace this idea of being one, and what does that imply for our relationship to each other and our relationship to the world? So love here is the ending of separation, when we recognize that there isn't a barrier between us. And this seems to me the hallmark of the Palestinian struggle. And we have people from all over the world, no matter which religion, no matter which background, no matter which culture, no matter which language, raising this flag and saying, "Free Palestine."
There are organizations that I've supported over the years that work in the tech sector that have done a lot of good for humanity. These organizations are fighting against the surveillance state. They're fighting for things like privacy. They're fighting for putting limits on AI and the use of AI, and I value the work that they do. Same with individuals that have taken on these projects and are doing it.
I'm on the Immigrant Rights Commission here in San Francisco, and I've been advocating against war and on behalf of human rights to the extent that I can. At the end of the day, international relations isn't always about that. It's about finding a path that you can reach an ultimate amount of peace at some point in the future.
To get an understanding of, what the archive does. You guys have been recording data since 1996. You run the Wayback Machine. You index the entire web. How is that different than what the NSA does?
I hear they get $20 billion a year to do this. The only thing that we collect are things that are publicly accessible, so that they're meant to be published. And if people find that they don't want it after the fact, we take it down.
There's efforts at the United Nations. There's something called the 13 Principles of Communication Surveillance that we helped put together that has well over, 600 leading NGOs from across the country who've signed on. And there's a General Assembly resolution that's going to get passed early next week that demands that, this is the UN, right? It demands that a report be written about how digital surveillance laws comport with human rights. So there's international stuff, there's national stuff, there's legislative stuff, there's judicial stuff, and of course we're EFF, so we're building technologies too to try to help keep people safe, including HTTPS, which is the technology that the Internet Archive just implemented to keep your communications secret. So this is something that we need to do a full court press on in every single area of our government and our technology, and we're hoping, there are activities already started in each of these realms, so whatever interests you, you can get plugged in and you can help.
Not because there is any guarantee that telling the truth will bring about change. When Snowden says his greatest fear was that nothing was changed, and Manning also, that is the likelihood. That's likely. But no one can say that there is no chance of change, as some do say, and they're wrong. They have no proof of that. The odds are against us, but the possibility is there, and the stakes are enormously high. So we have to realize that we live in a new world, and it may be too late to change, but it may not. We can't tell. So the answer is to tell the truth, to take the risks. Everybody who knows that the truth is being concealed should consider whether this is not the time for them to speak out and to do it in ways that will both capture public attention, especially with documents, and protect themselves from retaliation.
I guess I always had a problem with power and authority because I haven't seen it to the detriment of humanity, not to the benefit of humanity. My work currently involves a project called Forever Peace Now. The idea of forever peace, of lasting peace, of how do we achieve that with the use of AI and technology that's available to us. We can do so much for humanity, and unfortunately we're neglecting humanity and are focused on just killing one another. So Forever Peace Now has got 3 legs. The first one is a concept called Go Amor, which is basically a set of principles, the golden rule, doing to others as you want done to yourself, respecting human rights, respecting digital rights, as well as other principles. There are about 10 of them that I highlighted, and of course you're welcome to add to that list of principles. The second area is building this on ethical technology, on a foundation of ethical technology. So people that are working for us, that are working on these projects, are well compensated and are appreciated for the work that they do. The third is a site called Parents' Plea. Parents' Plea keeps track of people that have died and due to conflict, war, corporate greed. It keeps their personal stories. It keeps their biographies, their images, and their pleas from their surviving family members, age, nationality, religion. And the reason we're doing this is because if you're going to have forever peace, we need to have peace that's just. And just peace requires us to inspect the deaths that have taken place. Who's doing the killing? Who's doing the memeing and amputees and the horrors of these wars that we're witnessing? And that's what Parents' Plea tries to keep track of. It's mostly on right now focused on deaths, but then it will be expanded to other areas as well. There are 3 reasons I'm doing this. First, if there's ever going to be judgment in a court of law, we need to identify the victims and family statements of the people that have suffered as a result of these wars. So Parents' Plea, the pleas of surviving family members, becomes important. Second, if there's going to be reparation paid, if people are meant to be made whole by the defense industry, or reparation by companies or countries that benefited from these wars, then we need to have a way to keep track of who was harmed in order to pay them reparations. Third, if there's ever going to be a memorial for people that are suffered in these wars, we need to have more than just a wall of names. We need to be able to put together lists of biographies and personal stories and their childhood and a complete eulogy on who's lost their life and what the surviving family wants. So those are the 3 reasons why Parents' Pleas can maintaining a database of people that have died.
Rifat, was murdered by some of the technology that, Ousman actually just discussed. He's a Palestinian poet, lived in Gaza. He wrote one of his many poems, clearly, "If I must die, you must live. To tell my story, to sell my things, to buy a piece of cloth and some strings, make it white with a long tail, so the child somewhere in Gaza, while looking heaven in the eye, awaiting his dad who left in a blaze, and bid no one farewell, not even to his flesh, not even to himself, sees the kite, my kite you made, flying up above, and thinks for a moment an angel is there, bringing back love. If I must die, let it bring hope, let it be a tale." So we have to live, is what I'm taking away from that, And I know Vahid lost someone, I lost someone this week. A lot of us have lost people, and we've lost this poet. So we have to live. We have to keep fighting. There's solidarity and strength in numbers. We're going to be proven right, y'all. We might not be millionaires, but my God, we will have a revolution and we will turn this thing around. So thank you so much.
I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to this documentary and view the documentary online. I hope for better days ahead for all of humanity. And with that, I wish you the best of buys.